The cargo ship landed softly on the docking platform of Nexus Point, a massive space station floating in the empty space between three alien empires. The station was old and dirty, full of criminals, refugees, and people who wanted to disappear. It was the perfect place for someone who did not want to be found. Daniel Cole stepped off his ship and stretched his tired muscles. He was a human man in his late 30s with short brown hair and a face that looked older than his years. He wore simple work clothes and walked with the slow movements of a man who had nowhere important to be. Other species passed him without a second look. To them, he was just another human cargo hauler trying to make a living in a dangerous galaxy. His pilot, a young human woman named Lucy Park, followed behind him. She was smart and quick with a sharp tongue that got her into trouble more often than not. Behind her came their engineer, had blue skin and 4 arms that were perfect for fixing machines. He had worked with Daniel for 3 years and still did not fully understand his quiet captain. They walked through the station's busy market area where aliens of every shape and size sold goods both legal and illegal. Mercenaries stood on corners, advertising their services to anyone who would pay. Some of them looked at Daniel and laughed quietly among themselves. One large mercenary with scars across his face called out to Daniel, "Hey, pacifist, still running boxes instead of fighting. You humans are supposed to be warriors, but you act like a scared child." Daniel did not respond. He kept walking with his eyes forward and his face empty of emotion. Lucy's hands formed fists at her sides. She wanted to say something back, but Daniel had told her many times to ignore them. It was not worth the trouble. They reached the lower levels of the station where the refugees lived. These were people from destroyed worlds and failed colonies who had nowhere else to go. They survived on charity and whatever small work they could find. Daniel came here twice a week to deliver medical supplies that he bought with his own credits. A group of children ran up to meet him as he entered the refugee camp. They were from different species, but they had all learned to live together in this difficult place. One small girl pushed through the crowd to reach Daniel first. Her name was, and she had large dark eyes and pale purple skin. She was maybe 7 years old by human counting. Daniel said with a bright smile, "You came back." Something in Daniel's chest moved when he saw her. She reminded him of someone from long ago, someone he had failed to protect. He pushed that thought away and knelt down to her level. "I brought medicine for the sick ones," he said, "and maybe some extra food that fell off a supply ship." Lucy smiled at this. The food had not fallen off anything. Daniel had spent his own money on it, as he always did. The camp leader, an old woman named, approached Daniel with grateful tears in her eyes. "You are a good man," she said. "Most people forget we exist down here." Daniel shook his head. "I just deliver cargo, nothing special about that." But everyone could see it was special. In a station full of killers and thieves, this human chose kindness over profit. It confused some people. It made others think he was weak. That night, Daniel sat alone in his ship looking at an old photograph. The image showed a younger version of himself in military armor, standing with other soldiers. They all looked proud and strong. A medal hung around his neck in the picture. He remembered the day he received it, and he remembered the day he threw it away. Lucy found him there and saw the photograph before he could hide it. She did not ask questions. She had learned that Daniel would share his past when he was ready, and not before. The next morning brought trouble to Nexus Point. A large ship arrived at the station carrying the symbol of the Red Talon Syndicate. This was a mercenary gang known across the galaxy for their cruelty. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who stood in their way. Their leader was a massive named. He stood almost 8 feet tall with thick skin covered in battle scars. His eyes were small and cruel, and his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. He walked through the station like he owned it, because soon he would. Within hours, men were everywhere. They demanded payment from every business for protection. Those who refused were beaten or worse. Station security did nothing because had paid them to look away. Daniel watched all of this from a distance. His hands were steady and his face showed nothing, but inside he felt something dark beginning to wake up. 3 days later, men discovered the refugee camp. They walked through the poor shelters, laughing at the frightened people. S. Lieutenant announced that the refugees would now pay tribute to the Red Talon Syndicate. "We have nothing," said with a trembling voice. "We are barely surviving." Grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. "Then find something, or we will take your children and sell them to slavers. They will bring good prices in the outer territories." Daniel stood at the edge of the camp, watching. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to act. His training told him exactly how to stop this, how to disable every one of his men before they could react. But he forced himself to stay still. He had promised himself he would never be that person again. Lucy grabbed his arm. "Daniel," she whispered, "do something." He pulled away from her and walked back to his ship without a word. Lucy stared after him with shock and disappointment in her eyes. That night's men returned to the refugee camp. This time they did not ask for payment. They simply took what they wanted. They grabbed and 6 other children, dragging them away while their families screamed and begged. Daniel heard about it an hour later when a desperate message arrived on his ship. The voice belonged to, broken by crying. "Please," she said, "you are our only hope. They took the children. Please help us." Daniel sat in the dark of his cargo hold and listened to the message 3 times. On the screen, his face smiled at him from a photograph taken just days ago. She had reminded him of another child, another failure, another grave he could not visit. Something inside Daniel Cole began to change. The quiet man who delivered cargo was fading away. Something older and far more dangerous was taking his place. Lucy found him in the cargo hold, and this time his eyes were different. She had never seen that look before, but it made her step back with sudden fear. Daniel stood up slowly. "Get," he said, "we have work to do." "What kind of work?" Lucy asked. "The kind I promised I would never do again." Daniel walked to the back of his cargo ship where a heavy metal door had remained locked for 5 years. Lucy and followed him in silence, not knowing what to expect. Daniel placed his hand on the scanner beside the door, and it opened with a soft hiss of released air. Inside was a small room filled with things Lucy had never seen before. Military combat armor hung on the wall, black, and with the symbol of Earth's Special Operations Command on the chest. Weapons of various sizes sat in neat rows on shelves. Medals and commendations filled a display case, each one representing battles fought and won. But what caught Lucy's attention were the news clippings covering one wall. She moved closer to read them, and her breath caught in her throat. "The Ghost of Meridian," one headline read. "Human soldier holds position against 3,000 enemy troops." Another said, "Legendary human warrior disappears after classified mission." Lucy turned to look at Daniel with new eyes. "You are him," she said, "the Ghost of Meridian. I grew up hearing stories about you. They said you were the deadliest soldier humanity ever produced." Daniel did not respond. He was looking at a different clipping, one that was older and more worn than the others. It showed a burning colony and a list of civilian casualties. Among the dead was a child named Maria Santos, age 7. Made a worried sound with his throat. "Captain," he said, "I have worked with you for 3 years. Why did you never tell us who you were?" "Because that person is dead," Daniel said quietly. "He died on Meridian when a mission went wrong and innocent people paid the price." He touched the picture of the young girl. "She was hiding in a building we were told was empty. I followed orders and she died for it." Lucy stepped closer to him. "But the children here will die too if we do nothing. Will die." Daniel closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, something had changed. The quiet cargo hauler was gone. In his place stood a soldier who had faced impossible odds and won. He reached for his armor and began putting it on. The movements were smooth and practiced, like he had done this 1,000 times. The armor fit perfectly despite the years. "I need information about's compound," Daniel said. His voice was different now, harder and more focused. "How many men he has, where the children are being held, what his security looks like." Nodded and hurried to his computer station. "I will find everything I can, Captain." Lucy watched Daniel finish putting on his armor. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Daniel looked at her with those new cold eyes. "I need you to spread a message. Tell everyone on this station that Daniel Cole is looking for the Red Talon Syndicate. Tell them I want my message delivered to personally." "What message?" Lucy asked. Daniel picked up a knife from his weapons shelf and tested its edge. "Tell him to return the children within 1 station cycle. Tell him if he does not, I will come for them myself. And tell him to research the name Ghost of Meridian before he makes his decision." Lucy left to spread the word while Daniel continued his preparations. Within hours, the entire station was talking about the quiet cargo hauler who was asking dangerous questions. Most people thought it was a joke. The mercenaries who had mocked Daniel for months laughed at the rumor. But some of the older aliens, the ones who remembered the border wars, went very quiet when they heard the name Ghost of Meridian. They had seen what humans could do when pushed too far. They had seen entire armies fall before a single human soldier. That evening, Daniel walked into a bar where Lieutenant was drinking with his men. The room fell silent as Daniel entered. His armor gleamed under the dim lights, and his face showed no emotion at all. Laughed when he saw him, so the pacifist cargo hauler finally grew some courage. He stood up and walked toward Daniel with a mocking smile. "What do you want, human? Are you here to deliver a package?" Daniel moved so fast that no one saw it happen. One moment was standing and laughing. The next moment he was on the ground with his arm twisted behind his back and Daniel's knee on his spine. The other mercenaries reached for their weapons, but Daniel spoke without looking at them. "If any of you move, I will break his neck before you can draw." They froze. Daniel leaned down close to his ear. "You will deliver a message to your master. Return the children within 1 station cycle, or I will come for them. And when I come, I will not stop until every member of the Red Talon Syndicate is dead or broken." Tried to sound brave despite his fear. "Fears no human. He has an army, you are just one man." Daniel applied pressure to the arm until something popped, screamed. "1 man is all it takes," Daniel said. "Ask your master about Meridian. Ask him about the 3,000 soldiers who thought the same thing." He released and walked out of the bar without looking back. The mercenaries did not try to stop him. Delivered the message to that same night. The syndicate leader listened with growing anger, ready to dismiss the threat as foolish human bravado. But something made him pause. He ordered his men to research the name Ghost of Meridian. What they found made even uncomfortable. The human soldier had become legend during the border wars. He had held a defensive position alone for 3 days against overwhelming enemy forces. He had killed so many that they stopped counting. He had appeared and disappeared like a ghost, earning his name through impossible feats that some people still did not believe. And now this ghost was on Nexus Point, and he wanted the children back. His advisors suggested returning the children to avoid conflict, but was too proud to back down. If he showed weakness, his own men might turn against him. He had built his reputation on strength and fear. He could not let one human destroy that. He sent messages to allied gangs across the sector, calling in every favor and every debt. If the Ghost of Meridian wanted a fight, would give him one he would never forget. Back on his ship, Daniel received reports from about's preparations. The syndicate leader was gathering over 100 mercenaries to defend his compound. The children had been moved to a central chamber surrounded by guards. Lucy looked at the numbers and felt her stomach drop. "Daniel, there are too many, even for you." Daniel studied the layout of his compound on the screen. His eyes moved over every entrance, every corridor, every defensive position. In his mind, he was already planning, already seeing the battle that would come. "We are not going to assault his fortress," Daniel said finally. "We are going to tear it apart from the inside." "How?" Lucy asked. Daniel turned to face her, and she saw something terrifying in his eyes. It was not anger or hatred. It was certainty. The absolute confidence of a man who had done the impossible before and knew he could do it again. "Humans learned long ago that fear is the greatest weapon," Daniel said. "Before I kill a single one of them, I am going to make them afraid. I am going to make them so afraid that they will beg to surrender. And when he refuses, his own men will abandon him." He turned back to the screen showing his compound. "The children are depending on us, is depending on me. I failed to protect a child once. I will not fail again." Outside the ship, the station continued its normal routine. People bought and sold, mercenaries drank and boasted, and criminals planned their next crimes. They did not know that something was about to change. They did not know that a legend had awakened. The ghost of Meridian was hunting again. Daniel did not start with violence. He started with whispers. On the first day, members of the Red Talon Syndicate woke up to find their personal security codes had been changed. Someone had entered their private rooms while they slept and moved their belongings. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. But the message was clear: "I can reach you anywhere." A mercenary named found his family photograph turned face down on his desk. A gunner discovered that someone had written his home planet's coordinates on his mirror. A human traitor who worked for found a single bullet sitting on his pillow with his name carved into it. Panic began to spread through the syndicate. How had someone gotten past their security? How had someone entered their rooms without triggering any alarms? They increased their patrols and doubled their guards, but it made no difference. On the second day, Daniel began targeting their operations. A supply shipment worth thousands of credits disappeared from a locked warehouse. The guards swore no one had entered or left, but the cargo was simply gone. Weapon caches that the syndicate had hidden across the station were found empty or destroyed. Computer systems began failing at random times. Raged at his men, demanding answers. "Someone is helping the human," he shouted. "Find them and kill them." But there was no one to find. Daniel worked alone in the shadows, using skills he had spent years trying to forget. Helped with the computer systems from the safety of their ship, but everything else was Daniel. One man against an army, just like Meridian. On the third day, the messages started appearing. Written on walls and carved into doors, always the same two words: "He watches." Syndicate members began jumping at shadows. They stopped sleeping. They started fighting among themselves, each one convinced that someone else was the traitor helping the ghost. Tried to maintain control, but he could see his organization falling apart. In just 3 days, the human had done more damage than any enemy army, and he had not fired a single shot. Finally, decided to take action. He assembled his 12 best hunters, veterans from wars across the galaxy who had killed more people than they could count. He sent them into the station to find Daniel Cole and bring back his head. The hunters spread out through Nexus Point, using every trick they knew to track their target. They questioned informants, analyzed security footage, and set traps in likely locations. They were confident. After all, they were 12 experienced killers hunting one man. They did not understand that they were not the hunters. They were the prey. Daniel found the first one in the maintenance tunnels beneath the station's market district. The never saw him coming. One moment he was checking his weapon, and the next moment he was unconscious on the ground. Daniel left him alive but carved a message into his armor: "Last chance." The second hunter was a female known for her silent kills. She had murdered over 100 targets in her career and never been detected. Daniel caught her in a ventilation shaft and disabled her with 3 precise strikes. She woke up hours later, bound and helpless, with the same message carved into her equipment. One by one, the hunters fell. Daniel used the station's layout against them, appearing and disappearing like smoke. He knew these tunnels better than they did. He had spent months mapping every path, every hiding spot, every blind corner. The hunters thought they were searching a maze. They did not realize the maze belonged to Daniel. The last hunter was a massive who had fought in the border wars. He knew about the ghost of Meridian. He had hoped the stories were exaggerated. When Daniel stepped out of the shadows in front of him, he understood that the stories had not told the full truth. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. They was strong and well-trained, but Daniel was something else entirely. He moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. Every strike landed exactly where it needed to land. Every block came at the perfect moment. When it was over, the lay broken on the ground. Daniel knelt beside him and spoke quietly. "Tell this is his last warning. Return the children and leave this station. If he does not, I will come for him, and I will not stop." He sent all 12 hunters back to his compound. They arrived carried by station workers who had found them scattered across the station. None of them were dead, but all of them were finished as fighters. Their spirits were broken worse than their bodies. Looked at his defeated hunters and felt something he had not felt in years: fear. But pride is a powerful thing and had too much of it. Instead of surrendering, he made a decision that would seal his fate. He sent a message to Daniel with a video of and the other children. Human said in the recording, "You have caused me much trouble, but I still have what you want. If you attack me again, I will start killing these children one by one. Stop your games or their blood will be on your hands." Daniel watched the video in silence. Lucy and stood behind him, waiting to see how he would react. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Daniel's hands began to shake. It was small at first, barely visible, but it grew until his whole body was trembling. Lucy had never seen her captain lose control before. It frightened her more than anything else that had happened. "Daniel," she said softly, "what do we do?" Daniel turned to face her, and his eyes were burning with something beyond anger. It was a cold fire, controlled and focused, but more intense than any emotion Lucy had ever seen. "He threatened the children," Daniel said. His voice was quiet but carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. "He crossed the one line that should never be crossed." Daniel walked to his communication console and sent a message through a hacked channel. The syndicate leader appeared on screen, looking smug and confident. "You received my message," said with a cruel smile. "Good. Now you understand who has the power here." Daniel's face showed nothing. "You had a chance to walk away," he said. "You had multiple chances, but you chose to threaten children. You chose to use them as shields. Do you know what humans do to people who hurt children?" Laughed. "What? Talk them to death." Daniel leaned closer to the screen. "There is an old human saying, when you corner something meaner than you, do not be surprised when it fights back." "You cannot fight all of us," said. "I have gathered 150 of the deadliest mercenaries in this sector. You are one man." "I am coming for those children," Daniel said. "I am coming in 20 hours, and nothing you do will stop me. Not your walls, not your guns, not your army. When I am done, the Red Talon Syndicate will be nothing but a memory and a warning." He ended the transmission, stared at the blank screen, and told himself he was not afraid. He ordered his men to prepare for an assault. He brought in more reinforcements and fortified every entrance to his compound. He would show this human what happened to those who challenged the Red Talon Syndicate. But some of his men had heard the stories. Some of them had seen what Daniel did to the 12 hunters. That night, several of them quietly packed their belongings and left the station. They had seen something in the human's eyes that told them no amount of credits was worth what was coming. 20 hours remained. Daniel spent them preparing. He checked his weapons and armor. He studied the compound layout until he could see it with his eyes closed. He practiced movements he had not used in 5 years, and his body remembered every one. Lucy watched him and wondered if this was how legends were born, not through grand speeches or noble ideals, but through quiet preparation before an impossible fight. "Will you really attack them alone?" she asked. Daniel looked up from his work. "Is in there," he said. "7 other children are in there. They are scared and alone and waiting for someone to save them. I cannot let them down." He returned to his preparations, and Lucy understood something important. Daniel Cole was not fighting for glory or revenge. He was fighting because somewhere in that fortress, a little girl with purple skin and dark eyes was hoping that someone cared enough to come for her. And Daniel Cole cared more than could possibly imagine. 20 hours passed like a held breath across Nexus Point. Everyone on the station knew something terrible was about to happen. Shops closed early. People stayed in their homes. Even the criminals who usually ruled the night chose to remain hidden. Had transformed his compound into a fortress. Over 150 mercenaries stood guard at every entrance, corridor, and window. They carried the best weapons that illegal credits could buy. Heavy turrets covered the main approaches. Energy shields protected vital areas. The children were held in a central chamber surrounded by 20 of his most trusted soldiers. The syndicate leader stood in his command room and watched his defenses on multiple screens. He told himself he was ready. He told himself no single being could break through such an army, but deep inside, in a place he refused to acknowledge, was afraid. At exactly the promised time, Daniel Cole appeared at the main entrance to the compound. He walked out of the shadows and stood in the open, making no effort to hide. His blackened armor caught the station's artificial light. His face was calm and still like a frozen lake. The mercenaries on the front line looked at each other with confusion. This was the terrifying ghost of Meridian. This was the monster that had broken 12 of their best hunters. He was just standing there, alone, as if waiting for something. Watched on his screen and laughed. "The fool has come to die," he said. "Send the first squad to capture him. I want him alive for public execution." 20 mercenaries moved forward in a practiced formation. They were professionals, veterans of dozens of battles. They surrounded Daniel in a half-circle and raised their weapons. "On your knees, human," the squad leader commanded. "You are coming with us." Daniel looked at them with empty eyes. "No," he said, "I am not." What happened next would be told and retold across the galaxy for years to come. Daniel moved like nothing the mercenaries had ever seen. He was there, and then he was not. He was in front of them, and then he was behind them. His strikes landed faster than eyes could follow. The first mercenary fell with a broken arm. The second dropped from a precise hit to the nerve cluster in his neck. The third, fourth, and fifth collapsed before they could even fire their weapons. Daniel flowed through them like water through rocks, never stopping, never slowing. In under 2 minutes, all 20 mercenaries lay on the ground. Some were unconscious. Some were groaning in pain. None of them would fight again that day. Daniel stepped over their bodies and continued toward the compound entrance. Stared at his screen with wide eyes. "Send more," he shouted. "Send everyone." Mercenaries poured out of the compound to meet Daniel, 30 of them, then 40. They came at him with guns and blades and raw fury. They thought their numbers would overwhelm him. They were wrong. Daniel used every weapon in his arsenal. His guns fired with deadly accuracy when enemies were far. His hands and feet became weapons when they came close. He used the environment against them, throwing opponents into each other, using walls and pillars as shields and launching points. The bodies piled up behind him as he advanced. He did not kill unless he had no choice, but he made sure that everyone he touched would remember this day forever. He broke bones and shattered spirits. He turned brave warriors into frightened children. Inside the compound, worked his magic on the security systems. Doors that should have been locked slid open for Daniel. Alarms that should have warned defenders stayed silent. Turrets that should have fired at him turned instead on syndicate members. Lucy flew overhead in their small shuttle, cutting off reinforcement routes and providing updates on enemy positions. Daniel heard her voice in his ear, calm and steady despite the chaos below. 30 hostiles on your left, she reported. Another group coming from behind. Security station ahead has heavy weapons. Daniel adjusted his approach and kept moving forward. He was a machine built for this purpose, every movement calculated, every action precise. The years of peace had not dulled his skills. They had only stored them, waiting for the moment they would be needed again. The mercenaries had never faced anything like this. They had fought wars and killed hundreds, but this was different. This human seemed to know where they were before they moved. He seemed to predict their attacks before they made them. He was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost made of violence and determination. Some of them started to run. The same mercenaries who had terrorized worlds and laughed at death now fled from a single human. They had finally understood what the stories about the ghost of Meridian really meant. Watched his army crumble and felt his power slipping away. He grabbed his personal guards and retreated to the central chamber where the children were held. If nothing else, he still had his hostages. Daniel fought his way through corridor after corridor. His armor was scorched and dented from the few shots that had found their mark, but he did not slow down. He could not slow down, was counting on him. The children were counting on him. He reached the door to the central chamber and stopped. According to information, waited inside with his remaining elite guards and all 8 children. One wrong move could get the hostages killed. Daniel, Lucy's voice said in his ear, I'm reading at least 15 heat signatures in there plus the kids, is using them as shields. Daniel closed his eyes and took a slow breath. He had trained for situations like this. He had succeeded in situations like this, but the stakes had never felt so personal. He opened the door and stepped inside. Stood in the center of the room with a weapon pressed against his head. The little girl was crying quietly, her dark eyes full of terror. The other children huddled nearby, surrounded by armed guards. Stop right there, commanded. His voice was higher than before, touched with panic he could not hide. Drop your weapons or I kill the girl. Daniel stopped. He looked at and saw the fear in her eyes. Then he looked at and saw something else. Desperation. You have lost, Daniel said calmly. Your army is broken. Your syndicate is finished. Let the children go and I will let you live. Laughed, but it was a hollow sound. You are in no position to bargain. I have the hostages. I have the power. Daniel slowly lowered his weapons to the ground. He raised his hands where could see them. You are right, he said. You have the power. I surrender. His eyes lit up with cruel triumph. Finally, the great ghost of Meridian kneels before me. He gestured to his guards. Seize him. We will execute him slowly and broadcast it across the galaxy. The guards moved toward Daniel with confident smiles. They thought the battle was over. They thought they had won. Daniel looked at, close your eyes, he said gently. Cover your ears. Everything will be okay. The little girl trusted him. She shut her eyes and put her hands over her ears. The other children did the same. Daniel looked up at the ceiling. Now. The lights went out. What happened in the next 30 seconds would never be fully understood by those who survived it. In total darkness, Daniel became something beyond human. He could not see, but he did not need to. He had memorized every position in the room before the lights died. His ears told him where his enemies moved. His training guided his hands. The guards fell one by one. They fired their weapons blindly, hitting nothing but walls and each other. They screamed and cursed and begged, but the ghost moved among them like death itself. When the lights returned, Daniel stood in the center of the room surrounded by fallen enemies. His breathing was heavy and his armor was smoking from close-range hits, but he was alive. Every guard was down. The children were unharmed, still covering their eyes and ears as he had told them. Lay at his feet, his weapon hand broken, his face pressed against the cold floor. The mighty leader of the Red Talon Syndicate had been reduced to a whimpering creature in the dark. Daniel looked down at him without pity or anger. "You threatened children," he said. "You used them as shields. You would have sold them to slavers for profit." "Please," begged, "I surrender, show mercy." Daniel knelt beside him. "Mercy was available before you touched them. Mercy was available when I gave you multiple chances to walk away." He leaned closer. "But you chose this path. Now you will face human justice." Station security finally arrived minutes later, having been delayed by bribes that no longer mattered. They found one human standing among the wreckage of the most feared mercenary gang in the sector. Over 100 defeated enemies surrounded him. 8 children clung to him, crying with relief. One security officer looked at the scene with disbelief. "What happened here?" she asked. Lucy landed her shuttle nearby and walked over to answer. "Someone made a human angry," she said. Held tight to Daniel's hand and looked up at him with grateful tears streaming down her purple face. "You came for us," she whispered. "You really came." Daniel knelt down and hugged her gently. "I will always come," he said. "Always." Around them, the surviving mercenaries were being led away in restraints. Some of them looked at Daniel with something close to respect. Most looked at him with pure terror. They had seen the power of a human protecting what he loved. They would never forget it. The ghost of Meridian had returned, and the galaxy had been reminded why humans were feared. News of the Battle of Nexus Point spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every news channel, every trading post, every military academy discussed what had happened. One human had defeated an army of 150 mercenaries. One human had destroyed the most feared criminal organization in the sector. The name Daniel Cole became known on 1,000 worlds. The Red Talon Syndicate collapsed within days of capture. Without their leader and with their reputation destroyed, the remaining members scattered. Some tried to rebuild under new names, but no one would join them. No one wanted to risk the wrath of the ghost. And the other children were returned to the refugee camp, where their families waited with tears and prayers. The reunion was filled with joy that Lucy said she would remember forever. Parents held their children tight and thanked every god they knew. The nightmare was over. Daniel stood at the edge of the celebration and watched quietly. He had cleaned his armor and treated his wounds, but the exhaustion showed in his face. Lucy found him there and stood beside him in comfortable silence. "You saved them all," she said finally. "You saved this whole station." Daniel shook his head. "I just did what needed to be done." Lucy smiled at his modesty. She had seen what he did. Modesty did not change the truth. In the days that followed, the galaxy reacted to the news in different ways. The collective sent formal messages of gratitude and requested human military advisors for the first time in their history. They had always considered humans to be a young and unimportant species. Now they understood their mistake. The Empire, which had long seen humans as potential slaves or targets, quietly changed their policies. Internal documents warned against attacking human colonies or ships. The risk was simply too great. The Federation opened new diplomatic channels with Earth's government. They wanted trade agreements and security partnerships. They wanted humans as allies rather than enemies. Even criminal organizations across the sector adjusted their behavior. A new unwritten rule spread through the underworld. Do not harm human children. Do not threaten human families. The price of such actions was too high. Daniel received hundreds of offers in the weeks after the battle. Governments wanted to hire him as a military commander. Security companies offered fortunes for his services. Earth's own military reached out, asking him to return and train the next generation of soldiers. He refused them all. "I am not a soldier anymore," he explained to Lucy when she asked why. "What I did at Nexus Point was necessary. Those children needed someone to fight for them. But I will not go back to being a weapon that governments point at their enemies. I am done with that life." "So what will you do?" Lucy asked. Daniel looked out the window of their cargo ship at the refugee camp below. "I will keep doing what I was doing before, hauling cargo, helping people who need it, living quietly." Lucy laughed softly. "I do not think you can live quietly anymore. Everyone in the galaxy knows your name now. Then they will also know that I want to be left alone." He was right. In the months that followed, people gave Daniel Cole space. Pirates who once would have targeted his small ship stayed far away. Criminals avoided any route he might travel. Even the mercenaries who had mocked him before now treated him with careful respect. Daniel used his new reputation to help those who could not help themselves. He delivered supplies to struggling colonies without asking for payment. He intervened when he saw the weak being bullied by the strong. He never sought violence, but he never backed down from it when innocent lives were at stake. Visited him whenever his ship was docked at Nexus Point. The little girl had recovered from her ordeal with the strength that only children possess. She would run through the cargo bay and tell Daniel about her studies, her friends, and her dreams for the future. One day she asked him a question that made him pause. "Why did you save us? You did not know us. You had nothing to gain. Why did you fight so hard for children you had just met?" Daniel thought about the question for a long time before answering. "Because a long time ago," he said slowly, "I failed to protect a child. She died because I followed orders instead of following my heart. I have carried that guilt every day since. When I saw you and the others in danger, I knew I could not let it happen again. I could not let more children suffer when I had the power to stop it." Climbed onto his lap and hugged him. "You are a good person," she said simply. "That is why you saved us, because good people protect others even when it is hard." Daniel held her and felt something warm in his chest. It was not the heat of battle or the cold of regret. It was something gentler, something like healing. An alien scholar named Vex visited Nexus Point several months after the battle. She was writing a research paper about human behavior and wanted to understand what had happened. She interviewed dozens of witnesses, collecting their stories and observations. One old merchant gave her an answer that she included in her final report. "Humans are strange creatures," the merchant said. "They do not have claws like thee or venom like the. They cannot see in the dark like thee or survive in vacuum like my own people. By all measures, they should be weak." "Then why are they so feared?" Vex asked. The merchant smiled with ancient wisdom. "Because they develop something more dangerous than any natural weapon. They develop the ability to care deeply about others. And when you threaten what a human loves, you discover that their caring is backed by an iron will and a capacity for violence that has no limit." Vex wrote this down carefully. "So human anger is not like the rage of other species." "No," the merchant said. "Human anger is not blind or uncontrolled. It is focused and patient and absolutely relentless. A human will chase an enemy across the galaxy if necessary. A human will sacrifice everything, including their own life, to protect those they love. That is what makes them terrifying." Vex completed her report with a final observation that was shared across academic circles for years to come. When dealing with humans, she wrote, "Remember one simple rule. They will forgive almost anything done to themselves. They will show mercy to those who surrender. They will offer friendship to former enemies. But harm their families, their friends, their children, and you will face something no weapon can match. You will face human wrath, and it will not stop until the threat is ended completely." On the day she published her report, Daniel Cole was flying his cargo ship toward a distant colony that needed medical supplies. Lucy sat beside him in the cockpit while worked on some repairs in the engine room. It was a normal day for the most feared mercenary in the galaxy. Had given him a drawing before he left. It showed a figure in black and armor holding hands with a small purple girl. Below the picture, she had written in careful letters, "My hero." Daniel kept the drawing above his pilot's seat, where he could see it every day. Somewhere across the galaxy, a criminal lord considered raiding a human settlement for slaves. He had heard the stories about the ghost of Meridian, but he thought they were exaggerated. Surely no single human could be that dangerous. Then one of his advisors showed him the footage from Nexus Point. The criminal lord watched Daniel Cole tear through 150 mercenaries like they were training dummies. He watched the human move through darkness without slowing down. He watched an entire army break and run from one man. The criminal lord canceled his plans and never bothered humans again. This was the legacy of Daniel Cole, not a legacy of death and destruction, but a legacy of protection and warning. The galaxy had learned that humans were not to be underestimated. They had learned that human love was backed by human strength. They had learned the most important lesson of all. Never make a human angry. Daniel looked out at the stars streaming past his ship and felt at peace for the first time in years. He had been a ghost haunted by his past. Now he was something different. He was a guardian watching over those who could not protect themselves. Lucy noticed his calm expression and smiled. Thinking about something good, she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "I am thinking about the future," he said, "about all the good we can still do." Behind them, Nexus Point grew smaller and smaller until it was just another light among millions. But the story that started there would never be forgotten. It would be told and retold across generations, a reminder of what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but in that vastness there were humans, and as long as there were humans, there would be protectors willing to fight for the innocent. Daniel Cole flew onward into the stars, leaving legend behind and carrying hope ahead. The quiet man had found his purpose again. And somewhere in the refugee camp on Nexus Point, a little purple-skinned girl looked up at the sky and smiled, knowing that her hero was out there watching over the galaxy.